Welcome to the Private Lender Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, Chris and Jason here. Thanks for checking out the Private Lenders Podcast, wherever you may be watching or listening. We appreciate it. Question for you: how did you get into private lending? We're going to talk about a few of the different backgrounds that are common who end up in the private lending space, some of our own stories, some of what we've learned from other people around the mastermind, and hopefully provide some insight on what leads people to this business model, which is a great one.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. Like, I'll talk to a lot of people about, what do you do? Like, they know them in the real estate industry and things like that. And even folks that are in the real estate industry that don't fully know kind of what side or what sector, they're always like, well, how did you get into that business? It's interesting. And a lot of folks are like, I don't know, they don't think about it as a real estate niche. Most people, when they think about real estate investing, they think about fixing and flipping houses, buying rental properties, buying commercial assets, things like that. They feel like they don't think of the financial side of it, besides maybe being a mortgage broker or working at a bank or something like that. So it's interesting, but I will say that a lot of folks that enter the hard money lending space or become private lenders all have, for the most part, somewhat similar backgrounds of what kind of got them over, got them into that space.
Yeah, I mean, a common one for sure is people who at one point in time in the past were full-time real estate investors, especially when you're talking about the residential private lending. There's a good chance that they had a flipping background, doing a lot of fix and flips, holding rentals, all of that. And at some point decided to pivot. Maybe they burned out a little bit. Maybe they were tired of the transactional work and construction work and all the stuff that goes into flipping a house, which, we all know is labor intensive. It can be very lucrative for sure. But I think that some people gravitate towards lending over time, maybe later on in their career, because they burned out of some of that and they have their portfolio. They hold on to that. They've accumulated a good liquid net worth and they want to get into lending. Like, that's definitely a common prototype.
Yeah. They don't want to deal with the daily grind of flipping houses. Flipping houses is a pain in the ass. We've all been there, and it takes time. And, you can potentially make a lot more money on flipping houses and owning rentals. And again, you can diversify and do all of this stuff. Don't get me wrong. But, a lot of trends are, hey, I've been flipping houses for a long period of time. I've accumulated some wealth, and honestly, like, I don't want to deal with the headaches anymore. I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want unnecessary surprises. It's hard for me to find lots of good deals and things like that. So I think you're right. I think that's like one of the main ones where a lot of folks came from, is they already known real estate. Ours was funny because we owned some real estate. I'm talking about like in the dozens, not in the hundreds or thousands of units. And I remember one of the deals that we did was we spent a long time flipping this property, and we ran into lots of problems along the way. We ended up making some money, not a lot. It was above break even. And I remember, thinking back, and this was the aha moment for me. I was thinking back, and there was a guy named Ray who was our hard money lender. He was a hard money lender. It wasn't just a private guy lending his own funds out. He had like a formal operation. And I remember looking back and be like, you know what, man, we worked our ass off on this project for 6, 7, 8 months. And Ray made more money than we did on this thing. And he did nothing on it. And I mean, nothing's a relative word. Obviously, I know obviously he did something, but he didn't have to, it didn't really matter the outcome of our hard work on the project. He was making the same amount no matter what. And back in the day, that was 15% rate in 5-point days, the good old days.
True.
Which hopefully, we can figure out a way to get back to that here in the future by raising rates and fees. But long story short, whatever that came out to, I don't remember exactly what it was. Like, he probably made, I don't know, it was a $200 something thousand deal. So he made 10 grand plus on the front, plus probably another at least 10, 15. So he probably made like 25,000 on that deal. And I remember we made less than that. and we took all the risk, or a lot more risk, and had a lot of headaches.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely part of it. Like a lot of this is interesting in our history because a lot of this stuff is kind of going on at the same time. Like we're in a few of these categories of the common people who end up in private lending, and another one of those categories is people with a traditional lending background, and they're just looking for a better model. And that is definitely one of the things that stands out to me because back then, right out of college, we're selling some real estate, got into mortgage lending for a while, also did the investment property stuff that we were just talking about on the side, and really just getting our feet wet. We were in our 20s and we are figuring out what we were best at, where we fit in. And that ended up being HMB. That ended up being starting a hard money lending company. And one of the motivations that really stuck out to me, and I still think about this sometimes, is that I did like certain aspects of traditional lending, like bank lending, primary residence mortgage stuff, and some bank like commercial mortgage stuff. I think it was a really good business 101. I think the education that we got from it was very useful, but I saw it as a not the best business model and kind of limited in where it could go for us in particular. I'm not saying that like mortgage companies can't get huge, because they can, but I just saw it as a lot of work going on, a good amount of overhead for pretty minimal profit margin, right? I didn't love that about it. There's so much that went into running that operation, and I felt, in my opinion, not enough profit came out of it, pretty simply.
Yeah.
So when we started doing private loans in the early HMB days, and again, it was the 15 and 5 time, so that has something to do with it. But by doing a few simple loans, like we were pulling out some nice returns, some nice profit on that. And I saw that as much more scalable to a point. Like everyone's heard us say that we don't want a 100-person company. I know that there are private lending companies that are that big. And we could have, the take home net income, like grow into it. Obviously it took time. That was, good, sufficient, whatever you want to call it, growing, everything else, provided other opportunities with a manageable kind of operation. So it kind of like checked a few important boxes for us. I think also that our particular skill sets worked well in this. I think we've always been better at lending than we have at owning real estate. And we've done plenty of that over the years. And I just think that it's better suited to our skill sets running an operation like this.
Yeah. And private lending will always be profitable. And you can make whatever you want kind of out of it. And that doesn't mean you can't charge 15% and 5 points today, right? It might be, you might have to have a good marketing machine in order to continue to get lots and lots and lots of opportunities, so you can charge a premium on them. And that's okay if you choose to. But, the purpose of this business model is obviously to make money, and to make money at the least amount of risk as possible, and keep it flexible. And I think, going back to your comment related to the mortgage company is, not that you couldn't do big deals and make decent amount of money on them, but, the returns based on the work weren't great. It wasn't flexible at all, meaning like it was a pain in the neck to get deals through underwriting.
Yeah, and no control.
It was hard to kind of scale through employees, staff, systems, softwares, things like that. And again, not that there's no way to do that, but like you couldn't kind of, internally when you create your own business, you can create it the way that you see fit. And that, you want to see fit, you're not as regulated as maybe the bank is with who you can hire and what software you put in place. So there's just a lot, in essence, there's just a lot of things that it doesn't work. And here's the thing with private lending, the purpose of this business model. And I know there's a lot of different ways when you hear the term private lending or hard money lending, but in our minds, the best way that it's done is either by lending your own money or raising capital from other capital investors and taking an arbitrage on that. So not only do you have the transactional income coming in on the front end with fees, but you also have a trail of servicing income along the way, with the ultimate goal to be able to fund as many deals as possible. I mean, there's some very big institutional lenders out there that have done great for long periods of time, but at the same time, it was just transactional money that they were getting. We look at this, and I think a lot of folks in our Hard Money Mastermind group that we host feel like this as well, is you're creating an investment vehicle where you're deploying your own money. And that's where the real money's made. You're making almost twice as much money if you're the actual lender in the deal. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, obviously to accumulate money to be able to lend and to be able to deploy. But that's the way we'd always kind of looked at it from the early stages. We're not just looking to create a mortgage company where we're selling these loans off and move on to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. It's like, hey, we want to make money on the front end. We want to make money on the back end, and it can grow to a big thing. I mean, do the math. If you're lending out your own money at 13% and 3 points plus some other miscellaneous fees, and you're churning that money maybe once a year, you're making a 20% or twice a year. I'm sorry, if it's churning more than once, you're making a 20% annualized return on your money. It's a lot, and you can make more. You can even make more than that, depending on how you're lending out and things like that. So it's not necessarily like a volume game. And I don't think we ever wanted to be in something that we had to be reliant on doing just dozens or hundreds and hundreds of transactions over and over and over. We wanted to be profitable, but also something that is manageable. So when you're in a different market cycle, right? We've seen a few different kind of cycles. We're in an interesting run right now. We're not reliant on, hey, in order to keep your quality of life or to make the same amount of money, we got to do, 30 deals every month. Like, that's not fun. You want to be in a spot where, you're creating something that's still spitting out dividends and spitting out income, even if you're not producing as much as you potentially did, in the month before.
Yeah, that's one fun aspect about this business for sure, is what it can become over time, like how it's going to build through a few decades, right? Like, we're in this for the long haul, and we started pretty early. Starting in our late 20s is pretty early in this game, and thinking about what we can build it to in terms of the total portfolio, the percentage of it that we own, what the team looks like over a few decades is a cool thing, because there are real milestones and good goals that come frequently and that definitely will come with time. So that's something else that I've always been very into about the business model. But some people, another group of folks who end up in private lending, come at it from the opposite angle. They made their money elsewhere first. And we see this too in the mastermind in the inner circle, where, maybe some folks have sold a company, had a nice exit, 7-figure, 8-figure, what have you, maybe more. Maybe built up a real estate portfolio, sold that off, some buildings, multifamily. Like we've seen all these examples. And then they end up with a good amount of liquid net worth and want to continue to grow it and want to produce income from the capital they've accumulated. And this is a great model for that. So they get into it from the opposite end, coming in with a whole bunch of liquid capital. And that's totally cool too. And then sometimes if their background was not real estate, then they have to go approach it from that angle, like learning the mechanics of real estate, how things flow, how to underwrite, protect your investment, the different things that come along with being a lender, like, all this stuff, property insurance, title insurance, legal things, and having to go through that process of already having the cash, but learning how to deploy it responsibly and at the right rate of return is another common type that we see coming into this game. And they all work, like all these types we've talked about worked. And oftentimes, like Jason started with, people don't expect that they're going to end up in this little niche of the real estate and finance world of private money lending on investment, residential, and commercial deals. But yeah, I think that when people do find this business model, they end up pretty impressed by it, right? Like, I don't think there are too many people who come into the game and they're like, yeah, like some other like low margin, like pain in the ass businesses, like property management or something like that. Like there's or even title companies. Like there's a number of examples in real estate that you could look at. Not too many of those folks get into private lending and be like, I don't love the model. You don't hear that too much.
No. And we can kind of, end it with, you do it any way you want to do it, right? If you're trying to, if you're very ambitious and you want to do a lot of it, you want to lend a lot with your own money or other investors' money, you can do that. If you got a few $100,000 and you want to do one deal at a time and whatever, make a few $1,000 a month off that, you can do that as well. So it really just depends on your risk tolerance, how you want to set it up. That's the beauty of it. I would encourage, obviously, anyone who doesn't have as much experience with this, to learn as much as you can about it. Don't run, walk, right? Learn everything you can, but don't just start doing tons of deals. You need these deals to cycle through and mature so you can see, because what a deal on paper might look like might be very different than in reality, right? We've seen, we've done 3,000, maybe even 4,000 deals at this point. I don't even know, but over 3,000. So like, we've seen a lot of different scenarios, and, some of the deals that you thought were really strong, maybe they didn't end up being that strong. So some deals that we thought might not have been that strong ended up being very strong. So, but you got to learn somewhere, and you got to learn from experience. So learn as much as you can, obviously continue to listen to all these podcasts or watch these private lenders podcasts. Chris and I love doing them. One of the jokes that we've always had, if you haven't heard us say this before, is if we're just talking about this stuff anyways behind closed doors in our office next to each other, because we geek out on it. So we might as well just jump in front of camera and share it with everybody else, because we're very passionate about the business and about private lending and hard money lending.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks again for checking out the show. We hope that you got some value from it. If you did, please leave a comment or like it or share it with somebody who might also enjoy. And we'll see you next time here on the Private Lenders Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.